You would turn to Isaiah chapter 8. We're going to be reading in verse 19 here in just a moment. There was a lady, how many of you went out on Black Friday at 3 in the morning? Okay, Janet, 4 in the morning. No, I'm just kidding. 1 in the morning? Oh my goodness. Wow. I'll see if I can't get a hold of a good psychiatrist for you. I finally broke down and went out that afternoon because I needed a gallon of milk and I was in and out. I can tell you for 10 years I worked for Kmart Corporation, and one of the things I did, I was in charge of putting the toys on the shelves at night for them. And I can tell you for those 10 years, I never enjoyed a Christmas at all. Doesn't it appear to you at times that the people's attitudes gets worse and worse and worse? It seemed like there were more outbreaks of violence over TVs or whatever the case may be. And I hope you didn't buy a TV on Black Friday. If you did, I did some research, and just for information, got nothing to do with the sermon, but most of those TVs that they sold on Black Friday are between 8 and 10 years old. So just so you happen to know that. Okay, anyway, some of them are displays, and there's all kinds of little things when you look into that and see, because the company's going to make money off of it, aren't they? I don't care what they do, they're going to make money off of it. But anyway, there's this lady with her little boy, and they were shopping, running around. I don't know if it was 1 in the morning or not, but anyway, they were running around, and she lost him somewhere, and she couldn't find him anywhere. So she looked and looked, and finally, she found him looking at a nativity scene in the mall. And she ran up to him, and she was quite upset at him, and said, "What are you doing?" And as he looked at the nativity scene, he said, "I'm just trying to figure out where God fits into all of this." Where does he? Isaiah's words here that we're about to read are 750 years before Jesus is ever born. And as I read this, I see that what's going on in the life of Isaiah isn't any different than it is today. We might be more aware of a lot of those things, but still those things are there. That every age has its dangers, every difficulties that we face. What are some of the crises that we have in our world today? We don't have all the time for all of them. Anybody? Seth?
Homicides, stuff like that. Greed.
Violence, greed, okay. Anybody?
Human trafficking.
Human trafficking? Financial? I'm not going to get into healthcare. Political, corruption, all that's going on. We look around, and if you look at Isaiah, 750 years before Jesus, they are facing exactly those same things. Same things, okay? So how do we solve those? I understand that we have different problems and we look for solutions, but it just seems to me like eventually we should get to the point that we look and say, our way isn't working. It's not improving things, it's getting worse and worse, and even in our own personal lives, we'll talk about it in a moment. When does the time come when we stop and say, that's enough? I've traveled down this road far enough, it's not getting me anywhere. Who was the comedian once said that even if you win the rat race, you're still a rat? Okay? We can't win at this. So in the midst of this, what do we do? What do we do? Well, read with me. I will share with you the situation that exists in Isaiah's time and what God's solution is to it. Beginning of verse 19, Isaiah chapter 8. When men tell you to consult mediums and spiritists who whisper and mutter, should not a people inquire of their God? Why consult the dead on behalf of the living? To the law and to the testimony. If they do not speak according to this word, they have no light of dawn. Distressed and hungry, they will roam through the land. When they are famished, they will become enraged, and looking upward will curse their king and their God. Then they will look toward the earth and see only distress and darkness and fearful gloom, and they will be thrust into utter darkness. Nevertheless, there will be no more gloom for those who are in distress. In the past, he humbled the land of Zebulun and the land of Naphtali, but in the future he will honor Galilee of the Gentiles by way of the sea along the Jordan. The people walking in darkness have seen a great light. On those living in the land of the shadow of death, a light has dawned. You have enlarged the nation. You've increased their joy. They rejoice before you as people rejoice at the harvest, as men rejoice when dividing the plunder. For as in the day of Midian's defeat, you have shattered the yoke that burdens them, the bar across their shoulders, the rod of their oppressor. Every warrior's boot used in battle, and every garment rolled in blood will be destined for burning, will be fuel for the fire. For to us a child is born, to us a son is given, and the government will be on his shoulders. And he will be called Wonderful Counselor, Mighty God, Everlasting Father, Prince of Peace. Of the increase of his government and peace there will be no end. He will reign on David's throne and over his kingdom, establishing and upholding it with justice and righteousness from that time on and forever. The zeal of the Lord Almighty will accomplish this. It's a time of darkness. And I know we don't have time to go through all the passages that we should look at, but you know why Isaiah's country is going through this darkness? Do you know why every civilization from that time forward has gone through this time of darkness? Do you know why we in our world today are going through this darkness? Same reason. Do you know what it was? They turned their back on God. And therefore God turned his back on them. And here's where we find him at. And look at the words that Isaiah uses to describe all of this. Enraged, anger, distress, darkness, gloom. Sounds familiar, doesn't it? So let's look at the three steps that Isaiah takes us through here as we look at it's really getting dark. The first one is the destructive darkness. The rejection of truth always leads to moral decay. Okay? It may be very gradual, but whenever we reject the truth, it is going to cause us to go lower and lower as far as moral decay is concerned. That what we see going on around us is the result of human thinking, of human philosophy. You know, I've always said that philosophy asks us all the questions, but it never gives us any answers. It always brings up those things, you know, who am I? Why am I here? Where did I come from? Where am I going? All those neat questions, but it never gives us any answers for those things because people don't know. We need to call out to God, Isaiah says, and see what he says about this. You know, a good example, illustration of this, I had a really unique opportunity Friday. I went down to Rossville Friday afternoon and spent, 4 or 5 hours at Rossville with a group of my former classmates. It's been 44 years since I've seen these people. Boy, did they get old. Man. But as we were talking, there were 7 or 8 of us that met, who I knew as Bobby Ingram's house. Her last name was Gammon now. But we sat there and we talked, and they were, you know, I found that 8 of our classmates have passed away. I knew most of them, but one of my best friends had passed away. Now, do you remember Dave Hinkle? I did not know he died out in California not too long ago. So Donna was part of us through what, 8th grade?
Yes.
Yeah. Patty wants you to know that she's her older sister. Right? Yeah, definitely. Do you have any name like Precious Patty or anything like that? Anyway, moving on. But as we were talking, and we were talking about the different classmates and where they're at and what that was going on in their lives, it was amazing to me as we sat there and talked about some of the horrific things that some of our classmates had done as normal. Nobody was shocked. Nobody said, really? It was just like, all this stuff is normal. And it's not. It's not. It may be normal for society, but it's not normal for what's right and wrong. So our society struggles with all kinds of things. Personally, we struggle with all kinds of things. And where are the answers at? We keep asking, don't we? We keep looking in the wrong place. Our experts, you know that I'm not a fan of talk show hosts. I think there's an absolute waste of time. That they're not telling us the truth. They don't know the truth. Folks, I tell you what, I don't care who it is, if they are not a Christian, just take what they say and throw it to the side and go on. I remember Brooke, Danny's wife, one time asked me with Isaiah and Noah, how can I know, Joe, that I'm leading them the way God wants me to lead them? I've got these books here that were written by the experts, And I said, Brooke, you want my opinion? Take those books and throw them in the garbage can and take your Bible out, read it to them, and talk with them. Isn't that what Moses tells them? Tell it to your children when they get up, when they go to bed, when you walk along the road. That way we know the principles are true. And we've read these famous people that really don't know what they're talking about. But we keep listening to them. I don't know on your spam email, if you every once in a while I get this email. I can't remember the lady's name, but she has these 3 predictions for me. All I have to do is just click on and she will tell me 3 predictions about me. She doesn't even know who I am. She's concerned, believe it or not, she's concerned about one thing and one thing only. Little money that she can make off of that. We just keep asking these people why. Why? So we go deeper in darkness. The turmoil, the violence, the failure, the desperation. But we keep going the same direction. Why? We walk in the dark. And we stumble when we walk in the dark. We get bruised. We injure ourselves when we walk in the dark. But why then do we keep walking in the dark? We live today in a time of crisis. There is turmoil all around us, folks, because there's turmoil in us. You know, one of the classmates that I got to talk with quite a while yesterday, and I'm not going to mention names or anything, but we talked for quite a while, you know, on and off, and different questions that he asked me, different things he wanted to talk about. So one of the others said, well, what do you think he's getting at, Joe? And I said, well, I'd have to talk to him more than this, but my guess right now is he's running scared. That he is 63 years old, and he cannot justify his life. He doesn't see that he's done anything in his life. You know, his big thing was that you can tell whether you're successful or not by your grandchildren. And he kept bringing that up. You know what that tells to me? Personally, he doesn't feel like he has been. That he's lost the meaning of life. He can't find somewhere to connect. And boy, I wish he doesn't live close around, or I wish we had a chance to talk some more. And one of the things that was so indicative to me of this scared, stressed feeling that he had, is that as we were talking, he just got more intoxicated and more intoxicated and more intoxicated. Why? He's trying to kill the hurt. He's trying to numb himself because of this very thing. Isn't that a shame? Isn't that a shame? There's turmoil around us because there's turmoil in us. That we are trying to get along with other people and trying to get along with ourselves before we ever get along with God. And it's impossible. It goes the other way. I have to make peace with God, and then I can make peace with myself, and then I'll make peace with other people. But the other way, we're trying to get people to get along with each other that can't stand each other because they have missed the point of what God is all about. Hopelessness. You know, if there is one characteristic I see in a lot of people today, that's what it is. There's nothing to look forward to. We can't rejoice in life because it's a big burden. That we've got all these struggles that we have, and things aren't going well. We're afraid, we're stressed out. We have very little hope because we absolutely have nothing to look forward to. When it snows or it frosts, you know, there are some days that on the side of my house, it never melts. Because it's on the north side of my house. And the sun never gets there. It stays dark, it stays cold. And in the world today, when the light doesn't shine, it's going to be cold. It's going to be dark. And some of this is never going to go away because of that. There is no reason to celebrate life. We can't see why. That we've been through so much pain and disappointment that we don't see that it's ever going to improve. Now, if you believe that, it could beat you down after a while, couldn't it? If you really accept that, believing, you know, I've always said, if you have more memories than you've got dreams, then you need to stop and look where you're at. Because we as Christians ought to be dreaming. You know, it's what Ephesians 3, that God is able to do more than we ever ask or imagine, according to His power that is at work in us. So we find ourselves being beat down because we're watching the wrong TV shows, we're listening. I mean, goodness, the news can depress you beyond belief if you just keep watching it and watching it. somewhere in there the truth. I'm not sure exactly where it's at, but somewhere it is. So we keep looking at this. And we talked about the violence that is happening because of this toy or that toy. Folks, I worked back in the 70s in Walmart or in Kmart. It was no different then. The violence over some toy was there then. I can remember having to break up fights of people. There was one particular, I always bring this up because it's humorous to me in a way. Not to the one lady that got beat over the head with a doll, but it was humorous to me. There was one doll left. I don't remember, probably a Cabbage Patch or something like that. And this lady comes up and she puts it in her cart, but this other lady won it. So I'm standing there watching this, and this lady's following the other lady. Everywhere she goes, she's following her. And the first time this lady steps away from her car, she grabs it out of her car and puts it in hers. And then the ensuing fight. And it ends up that one of the ladies takes the doll and beats the other lady over the head with it. Ho, 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 Merry Christmas, right? So all I remember is standing there, and I said, I don't care what you do, but somebody's paying for that doll. Wow. Was it that important? Where do you think that doll is now? So it's not, human nature is the same all the way through. Never changes. It never changes. And that's where we see ourselves at, and it causes us to become so frustrated that we're going the wrong direction. We're getting caught up in a lie. It's one of the things that I tell the young people at camp all the time. You've been told a lie here. You're believing and you've been told a lie. And we need to expose that lie. So if we find ourselves caught up in what I've just described here, when do we stop? When do we say enough's enough? Is there ever going to be a time that we are so fed up with this that we disconnect the cable TV, that we throw the video games out the door, that we don't get caught up in all these things that get us off base here, get us to believe things that are absolutely not true, not true. That brings us to a defining point in our lives, and we say that's enough. And I'll bet you, if you're like me and everybody else, you decide to do that. It didn't last very long, but you really did decide that you were tired of all of this. So in the midst of this, what does Isaiah say? He gives us in chapter 8, the last part of chapter 8, all this horrible, horrible news. What is the first word in chapter 9, verse 1? Nevertheless, no matter how bad it is, there's one thing that we as Christians can hold on to is what? Hope in Jesus. No matter what. No matter what. Nevertheless. And I think it's really important here, and you'll need to seek this out for yourselves. He mentions two different tribes. Maybe Zebulun and Naphtali. Have you ever heard of them before? Because they weren't major tribes. They were the people on the wrong side of the tracks. But he announces this to them. It's for us common folks that he announces this for, no matter how bad it's going to get. And I think all of us would have to think that life is pretty difficult if we want to leave it where it's at. But he says that there's going to be this, if I can get this to the liberating light. There's a light in this darkness. Someone or something is going to shine on these places where there is no hope. And this is Isaiah's great statement of hope. We look at the world in which we live right now and all that's going on, and society is really going down the tubes and everything. And one thing that Isaiah says to us is, it doesn't have to be this way. It does not have to be the way that it is. How do we solve the problem of darkness? Came into the church last night about 10:30. First thing that I did was what? Turn on the light. I've tried to walk this without the light. I have bruises on my knees from the pews trying to walk this without. Now I say that, but the reality is, if you ever come here in the evening, it's one of the neatest things, because this cross lights up this whole sanctuary. The light is always on. And that is what Isaiah is saying to us. The light is always on. This great light, this dawning of the new day, this new hope, this new life. That when any time I decide that I can stop the direction my life is going, Anytime that I'm fed up with this, I want something far greater. That's why I tried to tell my classmate yesterday, just decide you've had enough of this. Decide that this is a no-win, dead-end street. Now it's a time for you to make that decision. And that's what Isaiah says to us. To show us the way out of darkness. How do we do that? He says by asking, by seeking God out, to find out what God has to say. Look in verse 20 of chapter 8. What is the standard that Isaiah shares with us in this? To who? To what? To the law and to the testimony. Because if you don't speak according to that, you have no light in you. Then it's back to the Word of God. In John chapter 8, verse 12, it's Jesus himself that says, I am the light of the world. That's a very, what Jesus says here, and I think it's important to understand that, he has 7 I ams. Okay? And each time he makes that statement, I am, and this is one of them, I am the light of the world. If you would translate that literally from the original language, he says, I, myself, and only I, am the only light of the world. Period. He's not a light. He's not one of many lights. He said, I am the only light of the world there is. Boy, what a claim if it was false. What a claim if it's true. That if I want to find the direction to live my life, it's in the light's there. The light is there. And we can have all kinds of different thoughts about that. But one of the things that I've learned is the fact the only time that you see shadows is when you turn away from the light. When you're facing the light, there is no shadow. The shadows come when you turn and look away from the light. And if our attitude toward life is negative, I suggest to you, you've looked away from the light. You've changed directions. You're walking away from the light, not toward the light. We can't save ourselves. We keep trying, and it just keeps getting worse. Getting worse. So Isaiah wants us to know that without a doubt it's going to be God that's going to perform this. Look down in verse 4 of chapter 9. For as in the day of Midian's defeat, you have shattered the yoke that burdens them. And you go on with what Isaiah says. How many of you know what he's talking about with Midian's defeat? There's a judge. His name was Gideon. And God comes to Gideon and says, you are going to deliver Israel from the Midianites. And it's a great, I think it's Judges 6, it's a great story. Because in the beginning, Gideon says, I can't do this. And God says, you're right, you can't. I'm going to, through you. So get all the army together, and the Midianite army was somewhere around 100,000 men. And he is able to gather up about 32,000 men to fight this 100,000. And he says, what do you think, God? And God says, you got too many soldiers. The ones who don't want to fight, tell them going home. 12,000 men leave. He's down to 20,000. Now what do you think, God? And God says, still too many guys. Gideon, you got to get rid of them. If you know the story, when Gideon finally goes fights against the 100,000 Midianite soldiers, he has 300 men. But who wins? Why? Because God. See, in our lives, we win because of Him. It's not, oh, we got this great plan and we got this all worked out and everything, and we can, we got all the money we need, and we got all the everything we need to do this. No, it's because God is the one that's going to accomplish this. Our salvation, it is He that accomplishes it. So many times I see so many people that think that they're going to go to heaven because they're being good. It's something they do, you see. And the reality is, I can't be good. I can't. It is God that delivers me. That's what Christmas is all about. That's what Easter is all about. That's what the Pentecost is all about. It's about God delivering us with His huge, huge light to deliver us from our predicament. We need to admit that we've lost our way. We just have to get down on our knees before God and say, I was going the right direction, but I lost my way here. I've started thinking about speculations and religious things, and I've missed Jesus. I've lost my way. And where I'm at, I can't find my way home. I can't. And I need to call out to God for the salvation that He has promised. There's a movie that is quite interesting. I've watched it a few times. It's called The Green Mile. How many of you ever watched that movie? That's a really interesting movie. Not sure what I think about a lot of that, except for my favorite part is John Coffey. Just like the drink man, but spelled differently. I don't know how many times he says that. He's this guy that, for some reason, he's convicted of murder, but he's innocent. Okay, you'll have to watch the movie to grab hold of the truth there. But this John Coffey has this ability to take illness and disease from people and take it into himself and to heal those people that had it. Okay? Quite interesting. The whole setup is interesting to me. Wouldn't that be neat if there was somebody that could do that? And the reality is, there is. His name is Jesus. That He can take my illness. And what's my illness? Not mental illness. I knew you were going to say that. What's my illness? Sin. And Jesus can take that sin and cure me from it and take on the consequence of that sin, just like John Coffey did in that movie. That when Jesus goes to the cross, He takes my sin. He suffers because of my sin, and He heals me. And that is what this is all about. So this light's coming. And He shares with us who this light is in the sacred, I guess that's getting up there right now. So we got the sacred sun. There we go, the sacred sun. Okay. Now, see, I don't know how many years that I have preached sermons for Christmas, but it always is an amazing thing to me that He looks at all the problems of the world, every problem, and boy, we've got them, don't we? And how's He going to solve it? With a baby. Now, who would have thought that? Well, we would want Jesus to become president of the United States. We would, He'd be a great president, wouldn't He? Whenever He's hungry, He just creates food. If you're sick, He comes to the hospital and just heals you. Man, what a great president. But that's not the way God chose it. Okay? Jesus had His chances to do that, but that's not what He was about. So when we look at all this darkness that's around us and this light that's come into the world, who's that light? A baby. Come on, with all this going on, you're going to change the world with a baby? You see, it was God's plan that He would visit the earth personally. That's what Christmas is about. I was going to show the little video of Linus as he gets up and recites Luke chapter 2. In fact, I think we have the book here, don't we? Georgia brought it to read it while I was preaching. Amen. Brought it, okay. He recites Luke chapter 2, and he stands there and says, and Charlie Brown, that's what Christmas is all about. Because that's what it's all about. This baby coming into the world to visit. God's going to visit personally. Deity is going to put on humanity. Philippians 2. That He is going to become flesh and blood. John 1:14, the Word became flesh and lived for a while among us. That here's this God that loves us so much that He would come and put Himself in the hands of sinful people to win us back to Him. We can think of a lot of heroes, I guess, but I put two up there. Who are they? And Zorro. The real Zorro. Okay? Oh, Donna's getting into this. She just made the seed. So the one thing that these two men had was a mask to guard their identity. Until Jesus comes, God has this mask on. We really don't know what God looks like. We really don't know what He's like. But when Jesus comes to earth, God takes his mask off. How can I say that? John 14:9. One of the most revolutionary verses in all of the Gospels. And what Jesus says there, if you've seen me, you've seen the Father. Don't ask me to see the Father. He's right in front of you. What a claim if that's a lie. But folks, what a claim if that's true. If that is the truth. And it is. And it is. Jesus is the light. And the light will show its brightest in the darkness. The fulfillment of what Isaiah says here is shared with us in Matthew chapter 4. That when Jesus begins his ministry, when John the Baptist is taken into prison, Jesus goes back to Galilee of the Gentiles. And it says, leaving Nazareth, he went and lived in Capernaum, which was by the lake in the area of Zebulun and Naphtali, to fulfill what was said through the prophet Isaiah, the land of Zebulun, the land of Naphtali, the way of the sea along the Jordan, Galilee of the Gentiles. The people living in darkness have seen a great light, and those living in the land of the shadow of death, a light has dawned in this baby. Ever since this baby has come, people have been spending a lot of their time trying to decide who he is. And Isaiah tells us we don't really have to debate who he is. Look at the names that he uses for him. The first name is Wonderful Counselor. He speaks of Mighty God or Hero God, the one who's come to save us. The Everlasting Father, the Prince of Peace. It's pretty obvious who this baby is. In Matthew, he's called Emmanuel, which means what? God with us. In Luke, he is Christ, Lord, Savior, telling us everything we need to know about this baby. But yet we continue to argue about that. I believe that it's very obvious that people know who this Jesus is. That is why we have certain segments of our society trying to remove him from every part of our society. Because they're afraid of him. They know who he is. They understand exactly who he is. So we've got to eliminate him because of the threat that he is to us. He's been that threat ever since he was born. It is Herod that goes and kills all the male children 2 years and under, just trying to get to this one baby so he will not take him from his throne. And it continues on. This baby is God's eternal answer to the problem of sin. That without him there is no way of forgiveness. There is no way of salvation. That he is such an extraordinary baby, that he has surpassed all the expectations. We certainly can say that he is unique, that nobody compares to what Jesus did. Nobody compares to what Jesus said. And this baby has grown up to be this Christ and Lord. He has brought fresh power and teaching and grace from God, that we can realize who he really is now and what we can have because of God. This baby is given to us. What do we want to do with it? Having Christ in Christmas. I hear this on the news a lot, especially Fox News has this big deal about war and Christmas. Well, it's war in Christ. It's not war in Christmas. But they'll go on about keeping Christ in Christmas. Do you realize, folks, that's up to me. That's up to you if you keep Christ in Christmas or not. Not our society. They can't stop us. There's no way they're going to be able to stop us. I saw an article the other day that said that within a generation the church could cease to exist on earth because of the direction things are going. It's impossible. Upon this rock I will build my church, Jesus said, and the gates of hell will not prevail against it. We have to understand who we are and what we have in Christ. Has he been born in you? If he has, we are forever changed by him. The King of Kings, the Lord of Lords, came to earth for you and me. The salvation I could not afford, he paid for in Calvary. What could I ever give him that would thank him for his Son? I'll confess and turn from my sin and live in the victory won. I often lose sight of Jesus because of Santa and Christmas trees. Jesus Christ is more than enough to grant me eternity. He's the wonderful counselor, the mighty God, Prince of Peace. He's the everlasting Father, and to think he came for me. He deserves no less than my all, though it's easy to give him less. Though born in a humble stall, God sent me his very best. Our hymn of invitation, our song of invitation is going to be, do you hear what I hear? Do you see what I see? Do you know what I know? Let's stand together.